Well, Doug Ford and his immature attitude toward the trade tariffs has caused a rift between Canada and the United States of America. I wonder who they'll blame, Ford or Carney. One thing's for sure, the Conservatives are going to have a field day. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Well, Mark Carney and Doug Ford are about to have a pretty long weekend. I wonder how that's going to affect their bromance. Today, Mark Carney found out that Donald Trump is going to sever or has ceased all trade negotiations with Canada because of an ad that Doug Ford ran on American television. The ad was using Ronald Reagan, or a snippet of a speech that an address that Ronald Reagan made, talking about tariffs. Because Doug Ford has no imagination, and because there are so many environmental laws in Canada, he could have spent that $75 million on anything else, but he's too chummy with Mark Carney. By contrast, the Alberta legislature sat today, and the first thing they introduced was a bill making it so that Ottawa cannot make decisions for Alberta. Oh, Mark Carney is having a long day. But, you would think that Mr. Negotiator, like he claims to be, he would be able to solve all of these problems almost instantly. I've seen Donald Trump negotiate all kinds of deals with all kinds of people. I mean, he got a peace deal between Israel and Hamas. It might not last. It might be fragile, but he got it nonetheless. And for some reason, Mark Carney can't hammer out a deal with him. Doesn't seem that it's Donald Trump holding back from the trade. It seems that it's Mark Carney and his buddy Doug Ford, who has been doing nothing for the last 6 months but yelling at Donald Trump. He's not putting shovels in the ground. He's not figuring out ways to pick up the slack for these jobs. He's got no ideas what to do. He's trying to cram everybody into the same 15-minute city of Toronto. He's got no shovels in the ground, no development. Oh, a nuclear power plant that's already been there for a long, long time that now the Ottawa has decided to piggyback in on and add $2 billion to make 4 small modular reactors, which will do 300,000 homes. Doesn't change the fact that there's nobody that's going to have the money to buy the home. I guess maybe Mark Carney feels like he can just build 300,000 homes this year and put them all in one spot. And this new small modular reactor will be able to take care of it, or the 3 of them, or whatever it is. You cannot believe the state of the politics in this country, in Canada. And we have leaders who don't know what they're doing. And people who are in charge that are acting like, they never got out of grade 5, guys. Mentally, they have never developed past grade 5. They have never reached maturity. Between Carney, Joly, Champagne, Doug Ford, it's a wonder this country hasn't already come apart at the seams. Let's get into this. Oh, what a day. I don't think Canadians are doing very well under the Liberal government, if I'm honest with you. We need to reevaluate our decision, our choices. Those people that didn't vote in this last election need to tell themselves, they need to get themselves to the polls. They need to make sure that they vote this time. Because we can see that the situation gets worse, not better. And our politicians are doing nothing. They're making a whole bunch of grandiose claims. They're talking about how they're going to be an energy superpower and we're going to have the first in the G7. The United States of America is part of the G7. And there's nothing that Canada has that they don't already have down there. So quit letting them try to trick you. Quit trying to think in your mind that voting against the Conservatives in Canada is going to upset Donald Trump. It's simply not the case. Case in point, we can see here how Donald Trump already shut down trade negotiations because of actions of Doug Ford, who has been doing nothing for the last 6 months, but, bad-mouthing Donald Trump. I don't know what he was expecting to happen, but I think that we can see that he didn't think his way through it, that his advisors who told him to go to the left and court the vote of the Liberal clearly should have advised him on how to deal with a personality like Donald Trump. I picked this up from CTV. I tried to find a video of Trump saying it, but I couldn't. Trump says trade negotiations with Canada are terminated after Ontario's anti-tariff ads. The U.S. President Trump says he is terminating all trade negotiations with Canada following a new anti-tariff ad from the Ontario government that features the voice of former U.S. President Ronald Reagan. Now, as a person who was young when Ronald Reagan was president, I can tell you one thing. You should have picked anybody else because Ronald Reagan is beloved. Ronald Reagan won 49 out of 50 states. Beloved. Of course, we can't expect Doug Ford to understand anything like that, I guess, because he doesn't think his way through it. He just acts like he's on the playground, like he's not going to invite somebody to a party, and that's the extent of his diplomatic skill set. The Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement which is fake featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs, Trump wrote in a post on Truth Social on Thursday. Here's that post. The Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used the advertisement, which is fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. The ad was for $75 million. That's tax dollars we're never getting back. They only did this to interfere with the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court and other courts. Tariffs are very important to the national security and economy of the USA. Based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Thank you for your attention in this matter, President DJT. Tariffs are very important to the national security and economy of the USA. In the X post Thursday, the Ronald Reagan Foundation said the ad misrepresents a radio address on free and fair trade from April 1987, and the government of Ontario did not seek or receive permission to use and edit the remarks. Excellent move. So you're telling me, on top of everything else, you didn't get permission? You felt like you weren't going to violate the copyright? Dude, read a book, dude. I mean, honestly, in 1987, were you even paying attention to politics? Because I was, even though I was a young person. And I can tell you right now that Ronald Reagan is the president that's generally accredited for turning the economy around and making for an explosion of wealth that came running through North America, especially. An explosion of wealth. Not to mention, he's the president that went to the wall and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. So he's the president generally accredited for being in charge when communism collapsed. Oh yeah, this was a great idea. No, this was good money well spent. I mean, we got people in food banks, people with no houses. Ontario's jobs are flooding out. And you decide to borrow $75 million to give it to American media companies to play it on TV. Oh, my. And you did all of that. And now you're probably looking at a lawsuit because you didn't get permission you're in copyright violation. I'm telling you right now, vote for me. I'll be Premier of Ontario. I can do a much better job than Doug. Come on. I mean, what are you doing? My goodness. Reagan and former progressive conservative Premier Brian Mulroney later went on to sign the U.S.-Canada Free Trade Agreement in 1988. I remember that too, NAFTA. And I can tell you that at the time, it was pretty monumental. It wasn't like there was an established free trade, especially when it included Mexico. At the time, Mexico was not the economy that it is now. Of course, Mexico has leaders that are trying to make it wealthy, make their people wealthy, make their people happy. So Mexico now has a greater GDP than Canada does. Canada, last time I looked, had slipped to 13th, and Mexico's 11th. I mean, I'll check it again there in whenever they release the numbers. But as far as I can tell, Canada doesn't even really belong in the G7 because we are many places removed from the G7. And the G7 doesn't allow China, so we already skip a spot. After the ad caught the attention of Trump earlier this week, Ontario Premier Doug Ford defended the move, saying its aim is to blast the message to Americans, particularly Republican districts where Trump draws his support. Trump draws his support. Listen to me, Premier Ford. Trump won every metric overwhelmingly. Every one of them. He draws his support from, I don't know, most American. The people that don't support Trump are less than 15% of the population. They mostly live in California and New York, and some of them in Minnesota. The ad, which Ford previously said cost $75 million, has been running on most major U.S. networks. Prime Minister Mark Carney and his cabinet have been in ongoing discussions with Trump and his administration for months as the trade war between the two countries drags on. See, it's not a war, though, is it? Because if it was a war, you would think the Americans would be worried about it. It's not a trade war. Mark Carney already said the Americans have the right to decide what kind of tariffs they put on the border. You'll remember when Carney said, well, I can't get a deal out of them, so he just tried to switch it to, we already have the best deal in the world. That was only a couple of weeks ago, and CTV helped him get there. Doug Ford helped him get there. I guess they all decided that this was a good idea to run this ad, and now it has exploded in their face. Speaking to reporters in Bowmanville, Ontario, alongside Ford on Thursday, Carney spoke again about the Americans moving to an approach which is sector by sector as opposed to global. In the situation we're in right now with the United States, with negotiations we're having with the United States, we're having very detailed, specific, constructive negotiations for the steel industry, the aluminum industry. That's elements of the energy industry. There's elements of the energy industry and a few other components in there. Carney is set to head to Asia on Friday with both the Asian and the APEC summits next week. Trump is also expected to attend APEC. This is awesome. So Donald Trump does this on Thursday night, then immediately leaves the country. Oh, that's great. And Mark Carney is also going to get to leave the country. So guess who's going to be fielding all those questions, Doug Ford? Guess who's going to be hiding all weekend, Canada? It's going to be Doug Ford. He'll be locked in his basement, crying on all of his people, trying to figure out how it all went so terribly wrong. I think what you should have done, Doug Ford, is ignored Donald Trump. What you should have done is been working on Mark Carney to get rid of those 9 laws. The ones that stop development, the ones that stop economic improvement in this country. Just like Danielle Smith, just like Premier Scott Moe. That's what they have been working on. And alongside the premiers, or at least some support from the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, and to some extent Manitoba. But where have you been, Doug Ford? You've been holding on to Mark Carney's pocket, following him around, thinking in your mind that it was all going to be great and it was all going to rub off on you. And now it has exploded in your face. It happened on a Thursday night. Now Donald Trump is probably on one of the, whatever it is, Air Force One, flying to somewhere in the Pacific, thinking in his mind that he won't dare allow for the cameras to pick up him and Mark Carney in vicinity or proximity to one another unless it's with his back to Mark Carney. I think that Doug Ford deserves to be put on the hot seat for this. I think it's time that we examine the fact that what was supposed to be the economic powerhouse of Canada, excluding the oil, that is supposed to have the manufacturing base for this country in it, has been running around the province acting like a spoiled child who didn't get his own way, acting like a boy whose girlfriend broke up with him and he just can't accept it and move on, has now damaged the diplomatic situation in Canada to the point where all of those jobs in Southern Ontario are now, they've never been more on the chopping block. The Kuzma deal has never been more on the chopping block. And what has Doug Ford to show for all of this chest pounding and all of this feet stomping? A couple of bottles of booze down the drain. Something tells me he's reaching for the booze to pour it right now, though. I don't think it's going down the drain. This is exactly the problem with having immature leaders. We must realize in Canada that we have to have people who are serious. The problem was never Donald Trump. It was never Donald Trump. The problem is those 9 laws that has been enacted by the Liberal government under the guise of green environmental foolishness, that has stopped productivity in most of the country, that has stopped foreign investment in all of the country, that has stopped domestic investment in all of the country. All of the people that had money to invest in Canada are now currently investing it in the same country that has just severed trade negotiations. Thank you, Doug Ford. Good work on that. We as a country need to understand that we need serious leaders, not people who think they're in the coffee, in the water cooler, not people acting immaturely like they're backbiting and talking behind each other's backs and all that kind of childishness. Things are really serious. And Ontario was supposed to be one of the more serious places. Doug Ford was looking for popularity, not solutions. Mark Carney was looking for popularity, not solutions. They both want to pad their wallets. They don't care what happens to you and I. Even if Doug Ford if he caused this problem accidentally, what difference does that make to the people that are about to lose all access to the trade negotiation? How do you know that it won't revert it now to the very beginning? How do you know that they aren't going through detail by detail right now saying, okay, that even if we get back to the table, we're never talking about that again. That's off the table. If they don't open up Quebec to our milk, we're not sitting down again. I mean, you have to think diplomatically, not like you're at a hockey game. You have to think like you're, on the world stage with the most powerful economy on earth, and becoming more and more powerful with every passing minute. An economy that is quite literally 16 times our size. And you want to run around and use one of their most favorite presidents of all time. Somebody should have advised you against this. You got all them left-leaning advisors running around through your camp. Did none of them read a book? Did not one of them take a political science course? Have none of them ever had any diplomacy in their lives? I don't think they have. I think that they just thought that it'll all be a good burn and everybody would, sit around and pat each other on the back and say, oh, look, we showed him. You showed him all right. He's laughing all the way to Asia. And now the people, the youth that were looking forward to these jobs, that were holding on just a little bit, the steel industry, the aluminum industry, well, they got to go back to like they were in March. You want to talk about uncertainty? Good work, Mr. Ford. You have made the situation so uncertain that I guess it's certain that it's no trade negotiations at all. And it's a fair bet that CUSMA will not be renewed, indicating that every product coming out of Canada will now have an 80 or whatever it is. 85% of the products coming out of Canada will now have a 25% tariff on it. Money well spent, eh, Mr. Ford? Good work. Before I wrap, I just would like to throw the icing on the cake. Feds and province to spend $3 billion on mini nuclear power plant in Bowmanville, Ontario. So Doug Ford and Mark Carney were together today. In time of recording, talking about how they're going to make a mini nuclear reactor in Bowmanville. I'll cover it in greater detail in another video. It's basically Ottawa given $2 billion and Ontario's given $1 billion. And they're going to make 4 nuclear reactors, small modular reactors, which the Americans are throwing up left, right, and center, but they're trying to make it seem like it's a big deal. I mean, Google is throwing up 3 small modular reactors in the United States. Apple is building 3. Tesla is already working on 1. Hyundai is working on 1. There's all kinds of small modular reactors going up all over the United States of America. But they want you to believe that this is somehow a nation-building project for Southern Ontario. 300,000 houses. How's that nation building? That's why I need to cover it in another video, because there's way more to it. But it does make me laugh at them because there they are sitting around, one guy worshiping the other guy, admiring his every move. And Donald Trump just says, well, I don't want to talk to either of you. I mean, I know it's bad for Canadians, but I did warn everybody that this was not going to work out well for Canada, because I understand Donald Trump's negotiating tactics. They are, for anybody who knows, anybody who speaks New York understands Donald Trump's negotiation tactics. And there was no way in the world we were ever going to come out on top in this one. The difference would not have been that Pierre Poilievre would have come out any better in negotiation against Donald Trump. The difference is that Pierre Poilievre would have taken the country in a different direction. There would be mines opening up. There would be pipelines being built. There would be ships being built. There would be industry up and running. There would be jobs. Okay, the border might have been expensive and there might have been some jobs gone, but there would have been jobs to replace it with. There would have been industry to replace it. That would already by now be replacing it. Instead of this, pipe dream that the liberal Mark Carney and the liberal Doug Ford, well, conservative in name only Doug Ford, are trying to sell to the rest of the country. Anyway, that's my opinion. You can let me know what your opinion is down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.